Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained on everything surrounding the Montreal Canadiens. We are so glad that you're here with us for episode 333, the triple threes. It's got to be lucky here on Rocket Sports Radio. And my name is Amy Johnson. I'm going to be your host for today's show. And I'm always very pleased to be joined by my co-host here in the studio. He's our founder and president here at Rocket Sports. His name's Mr. Rick Stevens. How you doing today, Rick?
Doing great. It's the first day of February. We got some Four Nations action coming up later this month. And of course, with the NFL season officially over, we can turn our eyes to F1 and the unveiling of the new vehicles and the new driver's lineup. And
wait a minute.
Yeah, nobody's paying attention to
anyone who has listened
Pro Bowl
to
or whatever else is left. I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, nobody cares about the Pro Bowl, but
see.
Yes, my Philadelphia Eagles are headed back to the Super Bowl.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I guess.
Shut up. Yes. I'm not thrilled that it's a rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the NFL completely rigged that. I would have liked to have played Josh Allen and the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see what happens. Happy to get back to the big dance. Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
Before that happens, though, there is something really, really big happening this weekend.
Okay, what's that?
Punxsutawney Phil.
Wyerton
Willie.
Yeah.
Shubakanady Sam.
And what's the Marmot?
Fred LaMarmot.
Yeah, that's right.
We have some very, very, very busy groundhog people that need to have a good day today, eat a good dinner, carb load, get a good night's sleep.
And then tomorrow.
They have a very big job to do tomorrow morning to let us know if spring's coming early or if we're all going to get dumped on with a bunch more snow.
If you believe in those kinds of things, yes.
I always look forward to Groundhog Day. But today what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the 3 games that the Canadiens played this past week, give you the highs and lows of those outings, as well as get you up to speed on injury reports, roster moves, those types of things, even something regarding the schedule. We've got some news about the schedule as well. Also, then we'll get into the Habs prospect report. We'll look at some NCAA action for some Habs prospects. We'll look at some European play. We'll look at some KHL play, as well as AHL and ECHL updates. Carey Price made an appearance this week on RDS. We're going to hear from some great audio from Carey Price with an interview that he did on, was it on L'Antichambre?
It was on RDS, yep.
On RDS. So we're going to hear from him in this first segment. And then in case you didn't know, it's apparently trade season. We're going to get you caught up with a bevy of whirlwind of trades that took place this past week, as well as some other big breaking NHL news that's got some big impacts coming up. All of that is in the first segment. Before in the second segment, we hit our big topic this week. We're calling this segment Habs Cling to Life Raft, waiting for a Four Nations rescue. It's no secret that the Canadiens are absolutely not in a good place at the moment. They've lost 4 straight games. Marty St. is picking a new excuse for why that's happening on a week-to-week basis. He's rotating through some excuses. And so we're going to take a look at what's got them here, what they have to get through to get to that big 2-week break for the Four Nations Cup, and what they can do with it going forward once they get some rest. And then finally, in our last segment, we are going to hear from some of you. We had a very interesting Canadiens Connection question of the week last week. And as always, you came up big with your responses. And so we want to bring some of those to you. That's one thing we should mention. If you're new to listening to the show, it's an interactive podcast. Every week, we will ask you a Canadiens Connection question of the week. And the reason for that is we want you to answer it so that we can pick the best answers from our listeners and our viewers and read them on next week's show for everyone and Habs fans all over the world to hear. So if you would like to get into the conversation and if you'd like to make your voice heard, send us a text on our Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Once again, that's 5853-ROCKET. You can also leave us a comment on our YouTube channel on the most recent video or this podcast when it comes out on YouTube. You can also send us a reply or a DM on our social media accounts at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And we want to hear from you. So be sure you send us a message, give us your replies, and don't forget to subscribe to the show. So let's do a quick walkthrough of what has happened this past week. First, it was a Saturday night tilt against the New Jersey Devils at the Bell Center. They did manage somehow. New Jersey kind of controlled things early on, but they did manage to scrap their way back and at least get a point out of it and got to overtime. I believe Jakub Dobiš was in the net this night. Yes, Jakub Dobiš was in the net this night. Got to overtime. But unfortunately lost in overtime. That was Dobeš's first loss of his NHL career, but he did get a point. He
still is without a regulation loss. He's earned points in every game he's played so far.
And whether you want to admit it or not, there was one particular player on the ice, not named Jakub Dobiš, who has to carry at least... I don't want to say a majority. I don't want to see the most. I don't want to say a hefty amount, but a good amount of responsibility for some goals against, and that's defenseman Mike Matheson, who, well, Rick, I think it's no secret that we have felt that Mike Matheson has been a bit of a defensive liability for quite a bit of time now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and it was, as you said, first period, the Canadiens are down 2-0. Suzuki scores. Early in the second period, Thomas Tatar replies, but Cole Caulfield brings them close, and it was Carrier in the third period with the tying goal. So it was, it was feel good moment. The Bell Center was buzzing. Jakub Dobiš was playing really well, and he faced 44 New Jersey shots, just a stellar game for him. But we talked about last week the fatigue, the compressed schedule, and it's causing fatigue, and Marty had spoken to it. And who's playing the most minutes for the Montreal Canadiens is Mike Matheson, and he had before the game gets to overtime, it was an awful game. On the ice for 3 of the New Jersey goals, the Hischier goal and the aforementioned Thomas Tatar goal, and then it was his mistake in overtime that mishandled a pass from Patrick Laine. Was it, a pinpoint tape-to-tape pass? No, but he, an NHL defenseman can certainly handle a pass that's a little off direction. And listen, if we're nitpicking about Patrick Laine's pass, then we can nitpick about a player when there's only 3 players on the ice in overtime getting into the right position to accept a pass. But anyway, it was a weak play. Turned the puck over, led to a breakaway. Jack Hughes ended the game. And for a guy who wears a letter, is a leader, it would expect some accountability. And instead it was, legitimate assessment of his game was deemed hate, and everybody rushed to his defense, including Marty St. Louis. And then one of the strangest quotes I've heard from a player who commits a gaffe like that, and I'm going to read the quote, "There are a lot of people who just love being negative. Sometimes they're louder than people who are positive. I think those who are positive are the real fans of our team," end quote, Mike Matheson. So if you're not praising Mike Matheson,
then you're not a real fan.
You're not a real Habs fan. Wow. Okay. Got it. Yeah, we know where you stand there. Anyway, it didn't show, to me, it didn't show leadership, and he should have just accepted responsibility. And even for the fact that Jakub Dobeš had played so well, and Matheson's mistake had led to the, as you said, first loss. So anyway, I was really disappointed by his actions and then his words.
Absolutely, I agree. Then come Tuesday night. Was it Tuesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday night. Winnipeg came to town.
And just if I can interject before you get into it, Marty had said, no, it's not. Matheson's been great. Matheson's been wonderful. Matheson isn't struggling. He's not fatigued. And then prior to the Winnipeg game, unrelated, I guess, Mike Matheson was moved to the left side. Had been playing the right, was moved to the left side. They took Carey away from Guhle and put Matheson on the left side and paired him with Carrier. And none other than the rookie, Lane Hudson, being forced to play on his offside, on his wrong side, with Guhle in the Winnipeg game. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. And
just adding some context here.
Well, yeah, I mean, but no, it's not. Mike Matheson's fine, really. That move or any other didn't help anything, because Winnipeg defeated them 4-1 on Thursday night. And then that was Tuesday night. And then Thursday night, the Minnesota Wild came to town. You had an aside prior to the Winnipeg game, the aside that I'll make for the Minnesota game, which Jakub Dobeš was back in net. This one was his first regulation loss. The Canadiens got blanked by the Minnesota Wild, with Minnesota winning 4-0. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe Jakub Dobeš would have been pleased that his first regulation loss wasn't the story of the night. But for me, what was disappointing was I have no qualms with the Bell Center wanting to pay tribute to a very well-regarded and very famous and very, storied Quebec-born goaltender who's playing his last game at the Bell Center. No problems with that at all. I do take umbrance big time when the crowd at the Bell Center chants that goaltender's name during the game, cheers when that goaltender makes a big save against their team, meaning their team wasn't able to score. The Canadiens put a big shot on goal. Marc-Andre Fleury comes up with a big save, and the whole place goes nuts. And I felt for Jakub Dobeš in that. I'm sure he understood at some level. I'm sure he looks up to Marc-Andre Fleury at some level, but there's a time and a place for the tribute and the thank you, and we appreciate you because you're one of us and you're Quebecois and all of that. But when it bleeds over into really blurring the lines of who you're there to support, I have a little bit of problem with that. Yeah, left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I think it went obviously it went too far, and I know lots of people liked it. I didn't, and maybe the difference is that when you've seen your team win a Stanley Cup, you don't expect to see that level of exuberance for an opposition win, an opposition shutout of your team, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so after the anthems, and listen, I'm going to be critical of the Bell Center folks here booing the U.S. anthem. I'm not on board for anyone booing anyone else's anthem. That was unclassy. That was uncalled for.
I'm not even going to comment because I'll say something that I shouldn't.
And then, before the game started, Marc-Andre Fleury was recognized by the PA and whatnot, and got a nice cheer. And I think that was appropriate. But it was during the final TV timeout in the third period, so 8 or 9 minutes left in the game. The Canadiens still in the game. The Canadiens fighting for a playoff spot. The Canadiens fighting to be in the mix. And the Bell Center put up on the Jumbotron the tribute, in English and French to Marc-Andre Fleury, and a 2-minute standing ovation for him. And then the chants of Fleury that were on and off for the rest of the game, that was demoralizing for the team who was fighting to come back. And really after that, it was completely over. When asked about it, interesting that this got scrubbed off the Canadian side. But anyway, when asked about it, Josh Anderson said, when asked about the ovation by Canadiens fans for the opposition goalie, he said, "It's hard to hear, but we could also take some motivation from it to find a way to turn the tide and get the crowd back on our side." End quote. End quote. That is the Montreal Canadiens losing the crowd to the opposition in their building. I've never heard, and so did it affect the team? Of course it did. Of course it did.
And as you say, it's not just a passing sentiment. Otherwise, it would not have gotten scrubbed off the video on the Canadian site. They wouldn't have removed it if it wasn't something contentious to say.
You mentioned Jakub Dobeš, classy move for him. He picked up the puck. He ended up with the puck at the end of the game, passed it off to Jared Spurgeon, the Wild captain, so he could pass it on to Fleury. And then the team lined up, the entire Montreal Canadiens team lined up at center ice to shake hands with Fleury. The coaching staff did as well. That apparently was Mike Matheson's idea. He approached Nick Suzuki at the end of the game. They talked about it and said, "Yeah, let's do it." Okay. So enough said there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is 3 losses this week, not including the loss that they ended last week with. That's leaves them now with a 24-22-5 record. Dropping to 7th in the Atlantic, 21st in the NHL. Remember how we were talking about how, they can ride the high as long as they want, but they have to consistently stay there because other teams are playing games and they're winning? Well, they're back down to 21st, and we'll see what they can do going forward, but numbers aren't going in their favor at this moment in time.
Last week we talked about their playoff chances being in the 30% range. It might have been 36%, if my memory serves. This week, because of the losing streak, they're at 13%. A 13% chance of making the playoffs. People ask, why is that so low? They're only 4 points out. They're only 5 points out there. But it's the number of teams. There's 7 or 8 teams that they have to be ahead of. And that's a difficult thing to do. So right now they're on pace for an 85-point season. As we said last week, the saving grace is that their schedule is getting very easy. They are 30th in terms of strength of schedule for their 31 remaining games. That means the third easiest schedule in the National Hockey League for the rest of the season. So that bodes well for them.
It does. As far as the lineup, there was a David Reinbacher sighting this week. In fact, he practiced with the Canadiens this week in a non-contact jersey, but still was on the ice for an actual practice, which is an encouraging sign.
And video of him being mobbed by his teammates as he went through the drills.
Absolutely. On some really difficult injury news, boy, you knew something was horribly wrong with Kaiden Guhle when he went down really awkwardly into the boards. Was that Thursday night? It was against Winnipeg, because then Struble got called up for Thursday. Yeah, so it was against Winnipeg. Went awkwardly into the boards in the corner, got up and immediately skated off, holding his right knee. You knew something was wrong. I don't know that any of us predicted that it was going to be a lacerated quadricep muscle.
Oh.
That just sounds painful. He then almost immediately within the next 48 hours underwent successful surgery to repair it, but it means that he will be out indefinitely. That is a big loss for Kaiden Guhle at this stage of the season, and it's a big loss for the Canadiens at this stage of the season.
Yeah, an unusual injury, but a difficult one. And the Canadiens are saying have attached the label right now indefinitely. They're not saying that he's done for the season. Whether they know more or whether that will depend on the depth of the cut and how it heals and so on. We're going to get our medical expert, Dr. Stephen Morris, with us next week to discuss that and others, other situations, Heineman and Reinbacher's return. And perhaps we'll have some more information from the Montreal Canadiens as this week goes on. But yeah, a huge loss to that blue line that has been struggling already in the last 4 games.
Then on Wednesday, as I just mentioned, because of that, Jaden Struble was recalled from Laval after just a 2-game conditioning stint, and he found himself back up in Montreal. Harvey Pinard made his Canadiens season debut. That was on Thursday night against Minnesota, and he very promptly went back to Laval on Friday morning. And then the interesting thing is the Canadiens flew out to the Canadiens have a Western road swing now. They're going to play out on the West Coast for a few games, and so they have left for California already. They don't play until Sunday, but they've left for California already. But they didn't take anybody extra. They have 12 forwards and 6 defensemen with them. But maybe something is in the cards, given that the AHL All-Star Game takes place this weekend on Sunday and Monday, which happens to be taking place in Palm Desert, California, which is basically Palm Springs. So Owen Beck and Logan Mailloux, who are the 2 representatives from Laval in the All-Star festivities this weekend, will already be in California.
So just as we were going to air, the Canadiens officially recalled forward Owen Beck and defenseman Logan Mailloux. Interesting timing of all of that. So they'll make their way. Now, how this will affect their appearance at the All-Star Game, what all that does, yet to be seen. But yes, the Canadiens, I mean, that's risky, just going out with 12 forwards and 6 defensemen. So they have Mailloux and Beck. They have called them up, and we'll all be watching to see if they play in a game over this California road trip, or whether they'll participate in the AHL All-Star Game.
if you're wondering what the timing would be like, so the Canadiens play at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday in Anaheim. That means their game will be done roughly somewhere between 6:30 and 7 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday evening. The AHL All-Star Skills Competition in Palm Springs starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So they might not get it. They might not make it back there for the skills competition, but the All-Star game isn't until the next night, Monday night. So
could be a busy few days for those two young men. Fortunately, they're not playing. It means the recall means they're not playing in Laval's Saturday game,
which is a matinee game. Yeah. So they got to take probably the nicer flight than having to fly tonight after their game. And a note about the schedule, next year's schedule. Would you believe we have a piece of news about that already? The Canadiens are going to be playing a preseason game against the Ottawa Senators. Amy, why is that news? Well, because it's going to take place in Quebec City. The Senators slated to play 2 games, I believe, at the Colisée Videotron, and one of them will be against Montreal.
Very nice.
All right, let's switch gears from the NHL to the Habs prospects.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
We're going to start with the NCAA because, gosh darn it, that Jacob Fowler just can't stay out of the news. Goaltender of the future. He won both games last week. Now, even if you know nothing about college hockey, I think it's safe to say you probably know that Boston College and Boston University are very, 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 very big rivals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jacob Fowler attends BC, Boston College. They played 2 games against BU, Boston University, last week. And, Jacob Fowler backstopped the BC Eagles to win both of them. So
Boston College, Fowler's team, number 1 team in the NCAA Division I men's rankings. Boston University, number 10, I believe. But yes, Fowler got the win in both games and earned a shutout. Boston College shutout BU 2-0 in Saturday's game. So that gives Jacob Fowler 6 shutouts on the season. He ran his record to 17-3-1. His goals against keeps dropping. It's now at 163. His save percentage keeps rising. It's now at 938. Just an absolutely sensational season.
It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. Speaking of goaltenders, checking in with Yevgeny Volokhin. Remember that name? He had a big game this week over playing against Kudlin. He plays for Sochi and stopping 45 of 47 shots in a 4-2 win over Kudlin. Why is that significant? Well, Rick, his record is pretty interesting.
Well, it's more so the Sochi's record. They're a terrible team. They're at the bottom of the standings. They don't win very often. So for Volokhin, it was his second win of the season. His record is 2-9-0. 303 goals against. Interestingly, though, his save percentage is 910. Pretty darn good for a goaltender who plays for such an awful team, and demonstrated there with a 45 save win over Kunlun, as you said.
And if we couldn't go a week without talking about Jacob Fowler, we definitely couldn't go a week without talking about Ivan Demidov. And would this kid just knock it off already? We were really proud and really excited when he was named KHL Rookie of the Month in, I believe it was October. And then we were really excited when he did it again in December. Well, for the 3rd time this season, Ivan Demidov has been named KHL Rookie of the Month, this time for January.
9 goals, 5 assists for 14 points in just 11 games in January alone. And during January, he averaged 18 minutes and 22 seconds of ice time, up considerably from what it has been the months before. That brings him this season in 50 games to 19 goals, 23 assists, 42 points. Tuesday, it was his first KHL hat trick. He had 6 shots on goal. So now, that record that most of you have been following, that is the KHL record for most points scored by an under 20 player. That was set in 2017 by Kirill Kaprizov, 42 points in 49 games. Demidov has tied that. So he, with 42 points in 50 games, so he's 1 point away from breaking that KHL record. By comparison, Matvei Michkov had 41 points in 47 games. So it seems clear that Demidov in the games ahead is going to be the record holder.
Pretty amazing.
Enormous accomplishment, achievement by the Canadiens prospect.
Speaking of great accomplishments by Canadiens prospects, even though Kaiden Primo is getting to the point where I don't know that he's going to be out of the prospect category sooner rather than later, but he has continued to help Laval, and Laval keeps succeeding. They won both of their games this week, beating Providence on the road 3-2, and then Friday night at home downed the Hartford Wolfpack 3-1. Primo has not lost a game since he has gone down to the AHL. He is 8-0-0.
And 173 goals against, 932 save percentage. Now, listen, he's playing for a very good team. Laval is a very good team, but I think, and we've said it before, his skills match the
well suited for the AHL.
Match the level of the AHL. He's maybe, as our guest said, and we played his comments, maybe not quick enough for the NHL, but and he's your favorite, so you can say who it was.
Marty Biron.
Marty
Biron mentioned that.
Yeah. But we've talked about it for a while, that he's well suited to the AHL, and he's showing it in his 8 starts.
So that keeps the Rocket at first place in the North Division, 3rd place overall in the AHL. They are sitting pretty right now. They have another game against Hartford at Place Bell this afternoon before they take a few days off for their All-Star break. Trois-Rivières also just winning. 3 games against the Maine Mariners this week keeps them in 3rd place in the ECHL. So the ECHL franchise, the AHL franchise, they're both just doing swimmingly. And if you want to keep up with more details of how the farm teams are doing, then you want to be sure that you're following at Rocket Sports on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And then you will get links to our own Chris G's weekly notepad articles giving you all the details about the Laval Rocket and the Trois-Rivières Lions. Sometimes they appear on the Hockey Buzz, sometimes they appear on our Substack. So the best way to make sure that you don't miss any of them is to just simply follow at Rocket Sports. Now, we did mention at the top of the show that Carey Price popped his head up this week and was a guest on L'Antichambre on RDS and had a really nice interview. Stefan Waite, PJ Stock, and the crew. And I thought it was funny that Stefan Waite asked Carey, of course, former Canadiens goaltending coach and the guy who basically guided Carey Price through his NHL career. It was Stefan Waite who asked Carey the question. He's been away from the game now for a little bit. What does he miss the most?
Yeah, well, besides you, it's probably just being around the fellas. I think most hockey players, when they're removed from playing the game for a bit, they miss being a part of a team environment. I think another thing, obviously, I miss is actually playing the games and that competitive nature and the preparation and everything that leads up to to the puck drop is something that I miss the most.
Yeah, so the first part is not surprising. I miss being part of the group, being part of the team. But he goes one further and said it's like preparing for games, getting into the games, the competitive aspect. That really drove him, and he really misses that.
He does. He was then asked, I think it was PJ Stock that asked him about who it was in hockey that he looked up to when he was a kid.
Oh, I had a lot of hockey heroes as a kid. I obviously looked up to goaltenders in particular. Marty Brodeur being one of them, and Patrick Waugh being another. All the great goaltenders of the time in my childhood I looked up to, and honestly, one of the people that I looked up to the most is probably my dad. He played goal himself, and also came from a small town, Veteran, Alberta, and was able to play pro hockey for a while. And he's, in my opinion, the measure of a man, and somebody I continue to look up to today.
Wow,
Super nice.
What a good person Carey Price is. And and names Brodeur and Waugh, but his hockey hero is his dad, who in his eyes defines the measure of a man. And as he said, he continues to look up to him. A wonderful answer and a wonderful example for his fans and of course his own children.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons that we always believe that, Carey Price, not only one of the best players on the ice, but also in the room as well. Just a ton of character.
And speaking of family, he was asked in the interview, do you have any plans to come back to hockey in maybe another capacity? And he said, maybe someday, but not right now. He said, I have 3 kids under 8 years old, and I want to be present. I want to be part of their lives as much as I can right now. And he talked about taking Lincoln down to their local rink and teaching him how to skate and how much fun that was. So we'll see him at some point, but he said that probably won't happen till his kids are teenagers and have stopped thinking that he's cool.
How could that ever happen, Carey? It's no secret that when Jakub Dobeš made his first couple of starts with the Canadiens this year, Carey Price, in a rare move, actually took to Twitter to comment and compliment Dobeš on his outstanding performance. So it naturally meant that the panel was going to ask him his thoughts on the newest young Canadiens goaltender.
Yeah, I've watched a little bit. One thing that I really love about him so far is his compete level and his body language. I've always told young goaltenders that your body language is such a big aspect of bringing confidence to your team, and I like what he brings.
Yeah, and we've heard that before, compete level for Jakub Dobeš. What we haven't heard is this idea of body language that, you send a message to your team, you send a message to the opposition about how you carry yourself in goal. And Carey noticed that about Jakub Dobeš, this idea of body language and sending positive messages and that develops confidence.
I agree. And I think that's a great observation. And I think that Carey probably so far likes what he sees with young Dobeš. And it was just great to get to hear from Price. I mentioned this to you before the show today, that I think that's the most relaxed and laid back that we've heard Carey in an interview in a long time. There were times that his media appearances could be defensive or contentious or just disinterested, but he actually sounded, he was casual, some quips and jokes to make Stefan Waite laugh and talking about the kids in a positive light. And he just sounds like he's in a really good place right now. And I think everybody can be happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we get to our big topic, where we're going to talk about this slump that the Canadiens are in and what they need to do to get themselves to the Four Nations break, we've got to talk a little bit about things happening around the NHL. And before we get to trades, first, we mentioned last week the bit of news that the Utah Hockey Club was denied a trademark application by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to trademark the name Yetis because there was going to be too much confusion around the Yeti coolers product and brand. So now the team is going to kind of go back to the drawing board, and they're going to, over the course of the next 3 home games, fans that attend the next 3 home games will get to vote on which name Utah should go with. And that's now Utah HC, the Utah Mammoth, or the Utah Outlaws. It was actually, I should say, before I let Rick chime in about this, it actually was originally they were going to vote between Utah HC, the Utah Mammoth, and the Utah Wasatch. And there were so many, there was apparently so much fan feedback of what do you mean the Outlaws isn't in there, that Utah actually listened to their fans and said, okay, you know what? We hear you. We went back and we reviewed the data the analytics of the data from the first couple of rounds of voting. And you're right. Outlaws was more popular than Wasatch. And so we're scrubbing Wasatch from the vote and Outlaws is in.
And listen, with all due respect to the fans in Utah and the fans anywhere, leaving decisions like this up to fans completely is that really smart? Because you've got all the people who are doing the market research surveys and how is this going to play? How is this going to look? How's it, so I think this fan vote is a bit engineered from the start. I mean, Utah HC is kind of a throwaway. They're not going to, I don't imagine they're going to continue with that name, and kind of a soccer kind of name. And unfortunately the Outlaws was a late ad, as you said. It was my pick, mainly because, it ends in an S. And we've talked about that. But also I think it's kind of cool and it's unique. Yeah. I expect that they're trying to steer fans towards Mammoth, and I guess that's fine too. But it's just funny that last week they put out a press release saying yes, despite the rejection from the patent office, they were sticking with Yetis, and then they ditched that very, very quickly and moved on to this fan idea. So
yeah,
the saga continues.
It does. All right. We have to get to trades. You know that we have to get to trades. The Athletic NHL Trade Board 5.0 is out now because a couple of big strike throughs are on that list. We're going to get to them as we go here. First and foremost, Calgary and Philadelphia. Calgary had the audacity to acquire Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost from the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, well, those two guys didn't get along all that well with Mr. Tortorella, so I guess the writing was on the wall there. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. And actually, I think that they're gonna. I think that those two will do. I value the types of players both Frost and Farabee are. I think they're going to do well in Calgary. So what did Calgary get for them? Well, what did the Flyers get for them? Forward Andrei Kuzmenko, Jacob Pelletier, 2025 second round pick and a 2028 seventh round pick. So a handy little package.
Yeah, Kuzmenko, former teammate of Michkov, reuniting those two together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see how this all works out.
Absolutely. Then there was the New York Rangers saying, all right, fine. We're going to acquire JT Miller and Eric Brandstrom and Jackson Dorrington from the Vancouver Canucks. For Philip Chittle, Victor Mancini, and a conditional first rounder in 2025.
Yeah, this seems, as many are saying, this seems the return seems a bit light for Vancouver for trading away a player of the status of JT Miller. He's going back to the Rangers where he was, and pointing out that it was reported that the Canes had offered considerably more, but when that deal didn't work out, they moved on, getting Rantanen instead. And so I think the message here is, if you wait, you might lose. And we've been saying it. We said it several times before Christmas that a lot of the trade activity is going to be completed before March 7th, and we said prior to the Four Nations break in February because of the chance of injury at the tournament. So we've seen some big deals happen, and it kind of goes against the natural way that Kent Hughes operates. He's patient, and waits till the end. We'll see if that affects the Canadiens, if they'll dip the toe in at all into this trade deadline activity.
Vancouver wasn't done there. They then turned around and acquired defenseman Marcus Pettersson and forward Drew O'Connor from the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for forward Danson Heinen, defenseman Vincent Desharnais, and prospect Melvin Fernstrom. In addition, the first-round pick that the Canucks acquired as part of the JT Miller trade earlier in the same night.
Just turned it around. Yep. All the Petterssons too.
All the Petterssons, everybody.
Yeah, three of them.
They miss having the Sedin twins, so I guess they want the Pettersson pair. Trio. Well, that's true. And then today, just before we went to air, Dallas and San Jose laying down a trade of their own where the Stars acquired Michael Granlund and Cody Ceci from the Sharks for a first-round pick and a conditional third in the 2025 NHL draft.
Sharks, who the Canadiens will face on this California road trip. They've given up their top goaltender and their top scorer. Looks like they're tanking for the draft. So as far as the Athletics, you mentioned the Athletics NHL Trade Board 5.0. They had JT Miller as this week as the most likely candidate to be traded. Yep, he's off the list. Brock Nelson, number 2. Yanni Gourde, number 3. Marcus Pettersson off the board now. Number 5 is Rasmus Ristolainen from Philadelphia. And as far as the Canadiens on the list, last week David Savard was number 5. He's dropped all the way to 15. Given that probably has a lot to do with the Kaiden Guhle injury. And Jake Evans has dropped one place from 18 to 19 on their list.
Have to wait to see. It's getting interesting. One last bit of NHL news, but it's not a small bit of news. The NHL and the NHLPA announced an agreement on salary cap increases for the next 3 seasons. Next year, the cap limit rises to $95.5 million. The year after that, it goes to $104 million. And in the 2027-28 season, a whopping $113.5 million. That is an enormous jump in 3 years.
Well, after the salary cap staying flat for 3 years following COVID, it's jumping in the neighborhood of $25 million in 3 years. And so Canadiens fans are gleefully clapping their hands and saying, all right, Kent. But there's all kinds of things that are going to start to factor in, including entry-level contracts and new contracts for some of the Canadiens players. And And I think that expectations are going to start to change, given the large jump in the cap by the players and their agents. Another factor is going to be the impact of the Canadian dollar. Of course, these numbers, the salary numbers are in US dollars. Their revenue, Canadian clubs, their revenue is in Canadian dollars, and that gap is widening. Lots of factors, lots of things to work out over the next 3 seasons. Should be good news for Kent Hughes. We'll just have to temper that a bit going forward.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Coming up right after a word from our sponsors over at DraftKings, we are going to get to our big topic segment, Habs cling to life raft, waiting for a Four Nations rescue. We're going to take a look at the slump that they're in, talk about what's possibly causing it, and what they need to do to get through the next few weeks and beyond. So stay with us. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. The playoffs are here and time is running out. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, that kind of thing. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, my name is Amy Johnson. You can find me on X at Flyers Rule. And with me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. You can be sure to follow him on X as well, at Rocket Sports. And of course, you can always follow our podcast at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Visit our website at canadiensconnection.fm if you ever miss an episode, and you can check out our full archive there. And just a reminder to subscribe to both the Canadiens Connection podcast in whatever player that you are currently listening or whatever your favorite podcast app is, and also to head over to InsideTheCanadiens.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, okay, real talk here. Canadiens have lost 4 straight games. Wasn't it just yesterday we were talking about this incredible win streak they were on?
Hottest team.
What's that?
Hottest team.
Hottest team. Not so much right now. And, you know, last week, Marty St. was blaming all their troubles basically on a compressed schedule and not enough practice time to implement any fixes, that kind of thing. This week, he has flipped the script now. And since they had practices and games and they were on the ice for 4 days in a row, that maybe that was more to blame, that they were fatigued because now they've got 4 days in a row that they're on the ice without a break. I mean, it's pick an excuse and stick with it, if you ask me. So there is the fatigue factor. It's midway through the season, so guys are a little battered at this point. And some very legitimate injuries to 2 pretty key players have really turned, Rick, you just called them, you talked about that what was just momentarily just a moment ago, the hottest team in the NHL to one that's completely in a tailspin. They've only won 1 game of their last 8. They have 5 more games to play until their break in this later in this month gets here. But it, at this point, it's like they're just, well, the title of the segment is great. Habs clinging to it's like they're clinging to the side of a life raft, just trying to hold on until they can get to that break.
Yeah, I think it's for Canadiens fans. They're wondering like what happened. It's like a switch went off. They're cruising along on a 13-3-1 stretch. They were scoring 3.65 goals a game. Now in the last 4 losses, they're scoring 1.5 goals a game. They're not getting any shots in the first period. 3 shots on Thursday night. They've been below 6 shots in 4 or 5 of the last few games. And their defensive coverage is really breaking down. And Marty St. Louis seems to be focused now on let's just get to the break and everything will be okay. It'll fix itself. And it really, for me, it kind of smacks of a desperation. At least that's the message he's sending. And when they faced adversity all season long, his favorite phrase was the league doesn't care. And I think what he's saying there is what he had been saying there is the league doesn't put an asterisk beside our points and saying, oh yeah, but the Canadiens are going through a compressed schedule and injuries and travel issues and all that sort of thing. Other teams are going through, and we talked about the travel schedule last week. You look at the teams that were even in the Bell Center this week. The Jets were missing their captain. The Wild were missing Kaprizov. And so, even the fact that they've run into some injury issues now, is that really the issue? They have 1 regulation win in their past 7 games. They're really struggling. And after everything falling into place and goals just coming, at will, they are really struggling.
And as you say, Marty seems to have this just laser focus now on just getting through the next couple of weeks until they can get to that break. Well, in fact, here you can listen to him basically say that himself.
I think it's a chase to the break right now. I think it's a chase to the break and trying to find a way here to get some points in these games. And that break, I think, is going to benefit us with some of the bumps and bruises that we have. I think it's game by game right now, and of course it hurts that we lost Emil and now we lose Guhle, but I think it's part of a season. But you just got to stay the course and keep working on the things you have to work on. And we talk about next man up, like it's pretty much what it is. And you feel like with the culture and the collective game that is not always perfect, but it's in a much better place than it has been, whether we're getting results or not. And I think it could help us, get us to the break.
Yeah, he's talking there. He mentioned Emil Heineman, the loss of him, and that seeed to be the start of this derailment. They're on this successful run. The 4th line is more than contributing. It's punching above its weight. It's the lineup that Marty likes to start periods with to set the tone. It sets the tone, and Jake Evans is scoring, Armia is scoring, Heineman's in the mix for rookie scoring. And the other thing that was the lines were stable. And now it looks like without Heineman, Marty is really struggling to find the right partners together, and Pezzetta hasn't worked, and there's a huge drop off from Heineman to Pezzetta, and now the defense was already struggling a little bit, but during their run, it was just after Guhle was moved back to his natural side, and the arrival of Carrier, and all of that was working well. But now we have a drop off, as looks like Arber Xhekaj is going to replace Guhle, and Struble will replace Xhekaj on that third line, and that's a big from Guhle. No disrespect to Xhekaj, but Guhle brings leadership. He eats a lot of minutes. He defends on the penalty kill, and now all these two injuries. We're not talking about losing a captain. We're not talking about losing a superstar like Kaprizov, but the loss of these two players is exposing the Canadiens' lack of depth.
It is, and well, we talked about this actually quite a bit in last week's show, episode 332. Our second segment was titled Mid-Season Fatigue, Are the Canadiens Running Out of Gas? Because we were starting to talk about, Lane Hudson wasn't looking like himself. Was he playing too much? He's just a rookie. He's still trying to adapt to an 82-game schedule for the first time. And were guys like, Matheson, guys like Guhle, lots of different players who are just starting to look tired. In fact, Marty actually had Marty had his own Marty way of kind of saying that this week in a question when Arpon Basu from The Athletic basically asked him about the energy level.
I don't know, Arpon. It's 82 games. There's nights that I know like you probably should have more juice than the other team. I don't know. I just felt like we looked like we lacked juice tonight.
So last week we asked the questions, are the Canadiens running out of gas? And Marty answered directly this week, no, not gas. They're
juice.
Out of juice. And he mentioned it, used the word juice maybe 5 times in both English and French.
Arpon, to his credit, then said, well, so define juice. And I don't think Marty necessarily cared for that, but
yeah, so I think, they're talking about fatigue, and we talked about that last week, blaming the schedule. Although, you saw again this week with the Wild coming in that they had played the night before. They were on a back-to-back on the road, and yet it was the Canadiens who looked like the fatigue team. So I don't know if you can really blame it on schedule, blame it on travel. Well, we talked about it last week in terms of miles traveled. Canadiens are kind of middle of the pack. Injuries. There was that significant injury to David Reinbacher. Was he expected to be in the lineup? Maybe yes, maybe no. But Patrick Laine, but he came back, and for the most part, the Canadiens have been relatively healthy until recently with the loss of Heineman and Guhle. So, again, it gets back to this depth issue. And you got to ask, who's at fault? We questioned the Pezzetta contract extension. He had seemed to have run out of his wonderfully fan favorite kind of guy, just a great guy to talk to. But had the team moved beyond him, and we've seen Marty has been very reluctant to use him. If he didn't have to this season, should more people have been rotated, more players rotated in from Laval? Should the depth have been built by Kent Hughes? It seems, this year it seems odd that there's a really a reluctance to use Laval Laval's humming along. We know that, but there seems to be a reluctance to want to use Laval as a resource, as a support, as a way of solving some of the issues. You think of Lucas Condata. Could he have been called up? Barry Boulay, Gustav Lindstrom's on an AHL contract. Could they have signed him to an NHL contract and made use of his experience, or Mayu or Engstrom? It's an interesting situation.
It is, and I don't know if part of that was, Laval started off the season so strong and the Canadiens didn't, so it was kind of obvious for the first couple of months that, well, they're, just leave everything in Laval well enough alone if you had to, because they were doing just fine and getting good experience down there. And I don't know if that just kind of became the crutch or the go-to, that just don't want to disrupt the apple cart down there. Let them get the good experience that they're getting down there. But at some point, you're handcuffing your NHL team if you're not at least considering rotating in some guys, even for a game or two here and there, just to take a look, see what they can offer, see if it doesn't spark something or a new bit of chemistry or a bit of energy and a little life into your NHL lineup as well. So I'll be curious to see, as you say, if they've recalled on paper at least Mayu and Owen Beck, will they actually play them? We'll have to wait to see.
When Beck was recalled, didn't get much ice time at all.
No.
And it's as I said, one regulation win in their past 7 games, and you can see in the body language before and after the game, you can see on the bench even that it's affecting the Canadiens' mood and spirit. Right now they're not scoring, as I said earlier. There's these defensive coverage breakdowns like there was earlier in the season. They're taking too many penalties. They're not drawing penalties. Special teams not having the same impact. Remember, Patrick Laine arrived and was parked and scoring. Now teams seem to have done a good job taking away that pass. I thought it was fascinating that Nick Suzuki noted the other night after the Minnesota game, and I'll read his quote, "There's a lot of whining on the bench. It had stopped for a long time and now it's back. We're losing too much energy with that, and we have to manage the situation," end quote.
So negative self-talk.
It is blaming referees and getting all kind of caught up in that. And that's where the leadership, both the coaching staff and the captain and alternate captains have to take care of that stuff.
So for me, Marty St. Louis is talking about they're chasing the Four Nations break, and that he said, it's important to try to get a few points in these games leading up to the break and whatnot. But he seems to be more focused on the rest and recovery that a 2-week break is going to give them. But I really don't think that it's wise for him or the team to overlook the next 5 games leading up to the break. 5 games is a lot. And with the precarious place that the wild card is, you need to get every point that you possibly can before the Four Nations break.
And there are some winnable games coming up.
Yeah.
The California trip, we talked about the trip last week and how the Kings will be tough on Wednesday, but the Ducks and Sharks, those are winnable games. And then a couple of tough contests next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, those 2 matinees at the Bell Center in the traditional Super Bowl weekend matchups. They've got to get some points out of these next 5 games.
They do. So that actually brings us right to our Canadiens Connection question of the week for all of you who are listening and watching. We want to know your thoughts on this question. What can Marty St. Louis do over the next 5 games to help boost the Canadiens' playoff chances. We've talked to you about how they've dropped because of this losing streak. We've talked to you about how congested that wild card race is and what they've got ahead. But we've also talked about that easy strength of schedule. So what do you think that St. Louis should do over the next 5 games between now and the Four Nations break to help boost the Canadiens' playoff chances? You can send us a text on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Drop us an email at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Leave us a comment on our YouTube channel or hit a reply or a DM on our social media channels at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We want to hear what you think that Marty can do to help kind of stop the bleeding a bit until they can get to that First Nations break. And of course, as always, we're going to pick out our best answers that we get from all of you and read them on next week's show. And that is what we are going to do just after this next break here on the podcast. We had some great responses to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week, and we're going to bring those to you right after this message from DraftKings. So stick with us. You are listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? What are you waiting for? You better get on it. The playoffs are here and time is running out. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players, choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, that kind of thing. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back once again to episode 333 of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. Hey, if you've been enjoying today's show, whether you've been listening for the first time today or if you've been a listener for a little while now and you haven't subscribed yet, won't you take a moment to just tap that subscribe button? Also, if you could, hitting the share button is also a great way to help us out. It's such an easy thing for you to do is to just hit share and send out the episode to your favorite social media channels. It really helps us to grow the show and to reach more Habs fans around the world. And so we would be very appreciative if you could do that. And if you're listening on a podcast platform that allows you to leave a review for the show, we would be ever so grateful if you could just give us a good 5-star review. And that also tells your favorite podcast player to push our show out to other Habs fans just like you so that they can enjoy the show as well. So last week on the Canadiens Connection question of the week, what can Marty... No, I'm getting ahead of myself. This week, let me remind you, this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week that we want to hear from you about is what can Marty St. Louis do over the next 5 games between now and the Four Nations break to help boost the Canadiens' playoff chances? What can he do to help the team turn things around? Don't forget to send us a text, drop us an email, leave us a comment on YouTube, or hit us up on a social media channel. Last week, it was a 2-part question. We asked, are the Canadiens' recent struggles due to overused players or deeper roster concerns? And how should the Habs manage their lineup to stay fresh? was a lot to think about. It was a lot to consider, and we had some really good replies. We have just a few of them for you from our YouTube channel today. First, we start with @Habinations. He says, well, gee, I think he's going to like what you were talking about in the last segment there, Rick, because he says the roster is thin. That would be a lack of depth, as we were just talking about. He says the roster is thin. They are unable to withstand the loss of Heineman, in my opinion. They should trade something to address a need, a left-handed 2C. That's interesting.
All right.
Also,
very specific.
Very specific. Very specific. I wonder which left-handed 2C he thinks they should trade for. @Habinations might tell us. Also, Alan W73 says, I think they were overachieving. I think this team needs to get a little bigger. It's been a problem with the Habs for a long time. They're not built for the playoffs. Even if they get there, look at teams like Vegas or Florida. Big, strong teams, which is an interesting observation.
And just further on that, if you look at team comparisons, average height, and there's very little variation in that. The Canadiens are 29th in that respect. Average weight, the Canadiens are better, 16th in that list. Vegas, of course, up there. But I think that what he's saying there is not just general height and weight, but at specific positions. I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but I expect that's what Alan's saying there.
Yeah. So two great replies there. Thank you very much. And then our good friend Center Heist 7948, frequent commenter. I'm going to let you take this one because he had a lot to say.
He did. He went on a bit of a rant, and he at the end he says, "Just had to rant a bit. Sorry, the whining really gets to me. I'll go back to the beginning. Great job with these awesome questions, Rick and Amy," says Center Ice. "Love the show, as you know. I think at the moment the team's depth is thin, absolutely. But I think losing Heineman has really shown and emphasized it. I think the team will be fine to get through the season as long as the health holds up. Unfortunately, Guhle's injury came after this. And as Heineman's getting close to being back, mostly definitely worst case scenario, he should return after Four Nations. We definitely need that fourth line back on pace. The Four Nations will give everyone the rest that they need." And he goes on to say, where is it here? "But the one thing I wanted to address is fatigue whining by pro athletes. It's really sickening to me coming from millionaires. We never heard this garbage back in the day, so all pro athletes need to get over themselves." Skip ahead. "Sorry, I have no sympathy for these millionaires. I don't buy excuses. I say, get the big boy pants on and stop whining, pro athletes."
Wow.
So thank you for that. A message sent there, a bit of a rant. He says, to end, keep the great shows coming. We'll do our best to do that. And thank you once again to Center Heist.
And I'm actually going to just plunk one more comment in here, just taking a look at our YouTube page, because this comment actually, even though it was a comment recently made to last week, to our show from 2 weeks ago, where we asked, are the Montreal Canadiens really in the playoff race? This viewer's answer actually does apply to last week's question as well, and it's a good one, and it's someone that we haven't heard from before, so I always like to give a shout out to new commenters. It's at Moon Observer Gilles 5730, and he says, Habs in the last 6 weeks have done good, much improved, but the loss of Heineman is hurting the Habs' fourth line, and the young Lane Hudson never has played in 82 games in a season of NHL level. I think it's starting to feel the strain of his energy level. Next season with Demidov and Kapanen could energize the Habs. I personally think the Habs will run out of energy to make the series, but we never know. They must avoid injuries, but the demanding NHL schedule is not making the situation any easier. So
great comment.
Great comment. Thank you for commenting, and some good points is there as well. Yes, there's going to be an even bigger injection of young energy next year, but he said, they need to avoid injuries. Well, that's the thing that's really started to crop up in the last couple of weeks. That's really starting to hurt things. So thank you to everyone who sent in such really thoughtful responses to the question. Can't wait to hear what you all have to say about this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. I hope you all also have plenty of coffee stocked up because you're going to need it.
Late nights.
As the not for you get Saturday night off, so have an enjoyable Saturday night with your friends and family,
or listening to back episodes of the Canadiens Connection podcast.
Well, you could do that too. Yeah. That would be just make a bowl of popcorn and enjoy your evening, because Montreal then plays the Anaheim Ducks on Sunday afternoon at 4:00 before heading out for some really late games on Tuesday and Wednesday. They play in San Jose against the Sharks, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time start on Tuesday night, and then same time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time start on Wednesday night, traveling just down the road to play the LA Kings. Our next podcast, of course, will be next Saturday, February 8th. Watch for a potential early drop for that one because the Canadiens do play at 1:00 that day, that next Saturday, the 8th, because it is that back-to-back kind of family matinee series, weekend series that the Canadiens always do on Super Bowl weekend. We will be looking forward to it. Hope you will be looking forward to it. Can't wait to hopefully talk about some wins next week. That would be a really good thing if we can talk about couple of wins. Be very encouraging. So take care, stay safe, and thank you so much for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.